Good afternoon. This is February 2019. This is what we call Miracles in Manhattan. It's a once-a-month lecture, class, study on some part of A Course in Miracles. We've been doing this since May of 2013, and I guess we're just going to keep doing it. Every second Sunday, except for May. In May, we have to move to the first Sunday so that we don't wind up on Mother's Day. On Mother's Day, I hope you'll be sharing with your mother, or if you're a mother, that people will be coming to share with you, or vice versa, or whatever. The topic that I selected for today originally, and we're still sticking with it, but was the 10 characteristics of a teacher of God. So we will be talking about the 10 characteristics of a teacher of God. However, when I sat down to begin to prepare the slides for our talk this afternoon, I got to the first one, which is trust. And I got 50 slides on trust. That is enough for a whole afternoon. Which means that all the other 9 characteristics we're going to have to get to in March and April. And then in May, we have I brought flyers about it, but I don't see, I left them in the backpack, I think. I'm going to have a special guest, Christina Strutt, who's coming down from Boston. And our topic is going to be quantum physics and A Course in Miracles. And where these two topics merge, overlap, it's so very, very exciting to see the correlations. As you know, we had a session on Zen last fall and the Course because there's a lot of similarities. We had a session on Advaita Vedanta and the Course in Miracles because there's so many wonderful. These are things from the past. I mean, Advaita Vedanta is as far back into the past as you can reach with spiritual material. We're talking about 1700, 1800 BC when the Rig Veda is being written, for example, right? And now we're going a bit into the future, or the very present and future in terms of what this all implies for quantum. It's so interesting, the validations which occur as science confirms a lot of what the Course in Miracles says. Things that the metaphysics of our ordinary world they don't make sense, like that there is no world, or that there is no time, right? Or that we actually are in a place outside of time and space. That doesn't make any sense, because if I do that, it hurts. Well, I didn't do it hard enough to hurt, cool. But we'd have to. And another thing is that you're not a body. So what we could say is that temporarily you are a body, but it's very temporary, right? Bob and I are very close friends with Shanti Rika, who is often here. As you all know, Shanti's going to be 92 very soon, and I stopped at Shanti's on the way into class today and talked to her for a little bit, and Shanti says she is ready to exit. She wants to go home. You know, it's why doesn't Jesus want to take me home? You know, I'm ready to go, right? And I'm not ready to climb those stairs out there anymore. So it's time to, at some point, we all leave this world, literally leave this world behind. So what does that mean? So it's going to be a lot of fun for us to talk about, especially when it comes to talking about quantum physics. And I wanted to talk a little bit about something besides the stages and development of trust to start with. As we begin to look at the basic characteristics of a teacher of God, what it says there that these are the characteristics that a teacher of God develops. So it doesn't mean that we have these characteristics with perfection as yet. So we are developing these qualities. And I really could think of this as kind of a spiritual maturity that we're going through. So it's a process. But it's also a process of what we want to be doing here, and that's one of the things that Jennifer and I want to be doing at the workshop in March in Ellendale, is going deeper, right? So we just keep going deeper and toward perfection. So some of you know, Brooke told me that she came in, she'd been reading this book that I wrote a few years ago called Lesson 1 on Perfect Happiness. And of all my books, it's the one that sells the least. On the other hand, Brooke said, and I agree, and Linda would agree, I think it's probably my best book. So why isn't it being read? Well, I think it's because of the title, Perfect Happiness. And what's wrong with perfect happiness? Nobody believes it. I mean, nobody believes that there is such a thing as perfect happiness, right? But what we can understand is that we are headed home, and that perfect happiness is our eventual goal. We're headed for heaven. Heaven is a state of perfection. It has to be a state of perfection. We can't have anything in heaven that's not perfected. That's why, among other things, there's no such thing as an ego in heaven. That would be an impossibility. This is the ego's world. Just look around. Turn on the television. You got a lot. This is the ego's world. It's always been the ego's world. It will always be the ego's world, and that's what dominates. I think it's sort of interesting that lately, I noticed that PBS has a series on dictators, right? On the, was it eight dictators or 9 dictators, right? If any of you have seen this on the PBS series, well, it's sort of interesting to watch that. And I thought, why are we having this stuff about dictators? And then 2020, which I don't watch, but I know my wife watches it, so I do see a little bit of coming and going to the family room. And it's all lately been about serial killers and mass murderers. Okay, so we got dictators on one part, serial killers and mass murderers on another channel, and then there's the news. So I was doing a talk at a church last Sunday, and I said, why is our consciousness so interested in all this? And I think that one lady had a really good answer. She says it's because it's a warning. It's a warning to us about, look what happens when things, and there's another show, there's a third one, it's on Rome, that's on the Smithsonian Channel, right? The 8 days out of Roman life. And if you read about or you study the Roman period, it was really pretty awful in terms of the way that they treated people when they went into Germany, for Germania, for example. They had a simple philosophy: just kill everyone. Just kill everyone. That's it. That was it. No men, women, children. We will not leave anyone alive. And then they went into to England with kind of the same philosophy. You either submit to us, you become our slaves, you do what we tell you to do, or you die. And there was a really good show this past week that I watched on the Roman thing about Bruta, who was a queen, sort of. We're talking about 60 A.D. This is very, very early. This is before there is in England, really, as we would even understand it, right? And she revolted against the Romans and succeeded for a while. I mean, she actually destroyed a Roman village. And then, of course, they revolted against her. And again, the philosophy was, we leave no one alive. That's it. Men, women, children, animals, everything dies, right? The ego is insane. But we'll get to a place, there's a slide I've got coming up in a moment of Aldous Huxley saying, maybe this planet is another planet's hell. Or maybe this Earth is another planet's hell. So this is obviously a place that we talk about. This is a split world. It's a divided world. So we do have some good stuff. There's this thing called love, which is really pretty incredible. And we have art and we have nature that but nature too can be violent and kind of tear things apart. So you kind of like, you never know what Mother Nature is going to bring our day. We got sunshine one day, and even here in New York, we got 7 degrees one day and 70 the next. So what's going on? But what we really want to look at is not the world. What we really want to look at is ourselves. And we want to begin to go deeper and deeper and deeper within, engaging in a process of cleaning house. And there's lots of ways that we can become aware of the parts of ourselves that need to be cleaned up. And actually, as you look at each of these 10 characteristics of a teacher of God, you'll see that each of them are places where we could probably do some polishing. And we could probably do some cleaning. Let's take one. Take patience. Okay, patience is one of the 10 characteristics of a teacher of God. All right, so maybe you're pretty good at patience. Maybe you're a pretty patient kind of person. But are you perfectly patient? You know how people will say, well, I'm very patient, but you know, there's a limit. You know, there's a point at which the patience gets tried. And then beyond that, there's no more patience, right? But if we're going to go for perfection, then we're going to get to a point where the Course says, infinitely patient. It says, if you could be infinitely patient, you'd be there, you'd be done, you'd be home, right? Infinite patience produces, the Course says, infinite patience produces immediate effect. It's an interesting line. Of course, it means infinite patience now. If I could be infinitely patient right now, I'd be there. I'd be awake in that sense. But there's these 10 different characteristics. In addition to these 10 characteristics, there are also, we'll get to a slide on in a moment, characteristics which are just inherent within us that we won't talk about. They're not talked about in terms of development, but in terms of exposing them. By exposing, I mean like love. Love is inherent in everyone. It's already there, but we have to uncover that, so to speak. We'll see what. Let's start with some of our slides. And so your function in heaven is creating. So your function on earth is healing. So let's talk about that a little bit. The Course talks several times about our function in heaven being creating, and we'll talk about creating in a little bit. It doesn't mean creating in the same sense in which it means creating here, not like a piece of art or something like that, right? We'll talk about that in a moment. Let's talk about the second part, that our function here on earth is healing. That's your main job. What are we healing? Well, obviously we're healing the mind. We're trying to heal the mind because we all have divided minds or split minds, or you could say sick minds. Or the Course would say insane. That's a word that's going to come up. It comes up right here, I think, as a matter of fact. So our main job is one of healing. We're always healing our mind. This is an insane world. We are part of that insanity, otherwise we wouldn't be here. It's interesting that if you, in the greater cosmological scheme of things, did you ever say, why did I choose this? You know, why am I here? How did I get into this body? Into this world? In this space? In this time? Well, the answer is universally, esoterically, metaphysically, that, as you know, this is a school. And we are here to obviously learn something. But what we're here to learn is not how to earn money or build bridges, although there's nothing wrong with earning money and building bridges. We're here to learn how to grow spiritually. We're learning how to perfect the imperfect. And I think if you're doing the course, you're on the way. There's a little edge here. You got an opportunity. Actually, everybody has the opportunity, and everybody is learning. We're actually learning all the time. The course says that there's no time in which the voice of the Holy Spirit isn't speaking to you. It's just a matter of whether or not we're paying attention. And there's a lot of ways in which we can begin to just become aware of, first of all, what's wrong, what needs to be cleaned up in my life. I know some of you here are therapists. So when a client comes to you, the client is really looking for guidance from you about how can I clean up this spot in my life that is, there's a lack of clarity here, there's a lack of understanding here, there's a relationship that isn't working out right, there's a job that's not working out right, I've got an addiction thing that I've got to deal with, or kind of whatever the problem is, but you gotta look at the problem. I lost a good friend this past month. I didn't know. He was my roommate in college, and Ted was a very sweet guy. We traveled through Europe together after we graduated from college back in 1964. That's when it was. Anyhow, unfortunately, Ted succumbed to alcohol and lived a pretty unhappy life throughout. I went to see him when I was just in Texas back in November, and I was so glad that we had a couple of hours together because the love is there. That's the love was there, and the love, and that's what mattered. That was still there, and we couldn't part without telling each other that we loved each other, and that's, gosh, you know, his family called me right away when they found out that this had happened, but the problem was not overcome. There was something missing in being able to overcome. We want to overcome these problems. We want to get deep. We want to polish. One of the ways I like to think about it is cleaning the center of who we are, the beingness that we are. Till we get down, we want to polish the center. We want to polish it so that there's no spots left. There's no darkness left. And let's be honest, we've all got a lot of work to do. Because it's just we do. We have a lot of work to do. Let me give you one example of some of the work that we have to do. A lot of it has to do. It's an interesting day. That's one of the dark spots that just got cleaned out. It just. Did you want to say something?
Oh, we're good online now.
Okay, good. Okay, good. So we're online now. Well, if you just joined us, we're a little bit into this, and follow along. One of the ways that we can see where cleaning has to be done is in terms of where we feel guilty. Okay? Guilt is a sure sign that your thinking is unnatural. So this would be it's interesting, the Course in Miracles, it never, ever once uses the word conscience. Not once in the entire book. But we could understand that guilt, if there's guilt in there, then there's some problem with our conscience. Something is speaking to you. Do you ever wake up in the morning and just lay there in bed before it's time to get up, but you're awake, but you're not ready to get up yet? And you're just laying there and you're going over some guilt, something that's going on, some problem. It's quiet, it's dark, you can't sleep because of this, whatever this is that's going on, but you're working on it. And along with guilt, we've got fear, and we've got anxiety going on. What can I do to be free of this guilt? What can I do to be free of this anxiety? I don't want to get too far onto this, but notice what happened with Liam Nilsson this past week, who talked about something that happened a long time ago, that this was sort of a dark spot in the mind that still needed to be looked at and cleaned up and dealt with. I was once at a party, and a fellow I didn't know very well, but knew. We were just sitting on a couch together, and he's a good Catholic guy. He's very much of a family man. And for some reason, maybe because I'm a minister, I don't know, he started telling me about this guilt that he had about when he was in his 20s, he did some things that he was not very proud of. He actually engaged in vandalism. And he didn't know why he did. He went along with this. But here it was, he's now in his mid-60s. And it's bothering him, this thing from 40-some years ago. It's back in there. It's not cleaned up, right? But somehow or another that it kind of needs, and some other things that he did back in the 20s. And the question partly becomes, why is this still coming up? And what can we do to polish this up, to clean this up? Forgiveness, of course, is the answer. But did you notice, by the way, that egos are not very forgiving? Right? So if egos aren't very forgiving, and sometimes you kind of wonder about, well, should we be talking about this, seeing how the egos are not going to let this go. You understand? Okay. So let's read this last line. Miracles are natural. When they do not occur, something has gone wrong. So something has gone wrong. All right. This is, I got to do this too. Here we go. This is the quote from, That's Aldous Huxley. Maybe this world is another planet's hell. Now keep in mind, he said that during World War II, right? So during World War II, you could understand why he was an Englishman, right? But it looked like hell in a lot of places during that time, right? So this is a world where there are dictators. I talked about this earlier. Serial killers, mass murders. As I said, even Mother Nature's not nice. Our bodies are heavy. There are a lot to deal with. You got to carry these things around. Diseases of all sorts are possible for us. And yet the Course in Miracles is also going to say, by the way, that that's a mind thing too. I mean, it's really a mind thing in terms of the way, if the mind can heal the body, the exact quote from the Course, if the mind can heal the body, but the body cannot heal the mind, then obviously the mind is the stronger thing. Somehow or another, we started getting Scientific American magazine. I didn't subscribe to it. It just started arriving, and it keeps arriving. And so I was looking at a copy of it this week, and it had a thing about the mind and depression, a thing on depression. And as I started reading, it was all about depression and chemicals in the mind. The chemicals that are, and that's, in Course terms, it's not about chemicals. It's not the chemicals that are causing the depression. The depression are causing the chemicals. You see, it's the other way around. It's the mind that needs to be healed. It's the mind which needs to be fixed. You could go get some you could get an antidote to whatever the chemicals were, and that might help, but it doesn't remove the problem. It's for the same reason the Course in Miracles says that all medicine is really magic. But you believe in magic. We believe in magic. So if you have a headache, you take an aspirin, and the headache goes away. You believe in magic. What has not gone away is the cause of the headache, right? The reason behind it. We treat it, you can treat the physical on the level of the physical, and that's going to help. That will change things. Of course, we want to do that. We would not do that. But let's dig deeper, and let's find out what's causing us to be sick in the first place. That's really where we need to go. All right? So let's go to the next slide. There's no need for healing in heaven. Heaven, by definition, is a state of perfection. I said we talked more about creation in Course terms. So creation is the extension of God's being or spirit. The extension of God's being or spirit, or mind. Creation results in effects, which is God's Son. What the Course is also telling us, that's also you. That's God's daughter. It's God's spirit. It's not the body. Bodies, as we already said, are temporal learning devices. That they are learning devices. It's the main purpose of the body. It's something that we are here to. We use this to learn, but we're learning on a spiritual level, not on a physical level. That's where we need to get into it. Understand it's the mind that's causing the problem. So bodies obviously don't last. So the statement, God created man in his own image and likeness, needs reinterpretation. Image can be understood as thought and likeness, as of a like quality. God did create spirit in his own thought, and of a quality like of his own. There is nothing else. So when it says God created man in his own likeness and image, it means as a mind. It doesn't mean as a body. God does not have a body. We tend to think of God, the Sistine Chapel or something, there's a God giving life to Adam, but as a body. But how do you draw the mind? How do you draw a spirit? This is something which is invisible. This is something which doesn't have form. And the Course is really telling you it's what doesn't have form, which is really the thing which is real. And that's what we're also going to look at when we start talking about physics and quantum physics. And the thing, what is the thing that's behind everything that causes life in the first place? It's not the body. It's not the world. It's not space, and it's not in time. It's a part of something that's way beyond all that. So again, the only thing which needs to be healed is the mind. So our function in heaven is creating. There is no need for healing in heaven. Why would you need healing in heaven? One of the definitions of heaven is it's a perfected state. So if it's a perfected state, there's no disease, there's no hurting, there's no pain, nothing like that. Creation in Course terms is the extension of God's being. I said that already, didn't I? All right, let's go on to the next slide. I'm reading the one. We'll get all of our... Okay. Healing is released from the fear of waking and the substitution of the decision to awake. Now, here's the important line. I really want to emphasize this. The decision to wake. At some point, we have to make the decision to wake. The decision to turn around and head home. And if you do in the Course, at least I think you've decided that you want to be involved in some kind of inner spiritual search, which does not just involve rituals and laws and creeds and dogmas, but something that's really going to help you to clean house and get down to the point of clarity and real seeing and real being. We're trying to get to, and this may sound crazy to some, but we're trying to get to the Christ mind ourselves. We're trying to get back to the point of remembering that this is who I am. This is what happens with Jesus. Jesus has this revelation. The revelation is, I and the Father are one. If you could say, I and the Father are one, you'd be done. You'd be there. You'd be Jesus. You'd be the Christ. You'd be the Christ mind. Now, you don't go around telling people about it. We have institutions where they lock people up. I sometimes wonder if some of the people who, we don't have the same kind of mental institutions that we used to have, but one of those things that would happen was that people get this, what they call the grandiosity kind of idea that somebody was saying they're Christ, and I think, well, maybe they're just a mystic that actually tripped into that and actually saw that and experienced that for a little while, but what are we going to do? Excuse me. We think that they're crazy, and maybe in some sense they are crazy, but there's that, in a deeper level, maybe you're in meditation, you see it. Maybe you're in a deep place of peace, you see it. You get a little taste of it. But you get enough of a taste of it too. The Course calls it what it calls the attraction of God and the attraction of guilt. So the attraction of God is pulling us. See, it's like a magnet. It's pulling us back home again. Shanti wants to go home. She's tired of this body and this, she really just wants to go home now. I'm getting tired, right? Enough of this, huh? right? On the other hand, there's this attraction of guilt. And the attraction of guilt pulls us down. And the attraction of guilt says, pour another drink. Take another hit. Light another cigarette. Lose your temper. Who gives a hell? I mean, you're right after all. What do you want to be patient for? You know, tell them what you feel about them. You know, give them the finger. Or whatever. You know, whatever the attraction of guilt is pulling us into, but it's pulling us down. My poor friend Ted never succeeded in being able to turn this thing around. His entire life just kept going down, 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 until it was over, you know, till the crash and burn ended. It's actually, when I got the note this week about his having died, I said, well, I'm sorry to hear it, but I'm so grateful. I mean, I'm so grateful that he's out of here. I'm so grateful he doesn't have to put up with this world anymore, or this body anymore. And all of the last time I was with him, one of the other things that he did was chain smoke throughout our entire time together. And I noticed, I could tell that he didn't know he was doing it. He didn't know he was lighting a cigarette on top of a cigarette, right? Because it was so habituated, such a habit, that it pulled him down so far. There was no knowledge of what was going. There had to be a cigarette. He couldn't not have a cigarette in a hand, right? Which is probably one of the things that contributed to his dying. So we got to make this decision. You make a conscious decision. The decision to wake is a reflection of the will to love. That's nice, isn't it? The decision of the will to love, and to love, and to love, and to keep loving. I think I may have told you at one point I had somebody I was working with that was a little difficult to work with, and I asked Jesus, how do I do this? And Jesus said, I mean, it was like just this inner voice, usually just 3-4 words, just keep loving her. Oh, that's a good answer. That's a great answer. Just keep loving. Just keep loving her. Right? So you just keep giving the love away, right? And it works. I mean, it really worked. In this case, I know it's still working. It's a process, but it's a process which is working, right? So all healing revolves in replacing fear with love. So if you're fearful, in this particular case, I'm talking about paranoid schizophrenia. That's fearful place, right? But that seems to be working. You don't see the paranoia. You don't see this. You don't see the fear. You just see that the love is in there. You really look deep enough into someone's eyes. I mean, you see it. That's why we love our pets so much, our dogs and cats and the others too. It's it's just they can't disagree with you, or talk. Well, they could, but I mean, it's much more likely that they're just going to be there loving you. I used to have a Cocker Spaniel, and God, I loved coming home to her. I mean, because she'd just be there at the door, little butt wiggling around like that. And I would always have to try to get her out the door because she would pee. And when she would get so excited, she would pee. And I thought, no, come outside. Yeah, okay, now you can do it. Her name was Joyful. And she was a joyful dog, right? So, at some point, everyone makes the decision to wake up, be it in this life or yet another one. But anybody want to come back? I always ask that question, and I don't get any yeses. Once in a while, I get a yes, but you keep studying, and you'll know the answer to that is no. And people who had near-death experiences universally will tell you they didn't want to come back. They didn't want to come back. They only came back because there's a reason. There's always a reason to come back. They have a kid to raise. They have a mission. Anita Marjani came back, she said, because she had to tell people about what she saw. That was a mission. She had a mission. And once you got a mission, once you got a purpose in your life, that's at another time I want to talk about meaning and purpose and destiny in our lives. That's a really important, the willingness to fulfill our purpose. So everyone gets to go home because we already are home. Which really means, of course, in Miracles says that what happens is we're waking up to the reality of what already is. We're just waking up to this reality. The decision to wake all the way up, right? So let's go to the next one. The surface traits of God's teachers are not at all alike. They do not look alike. Obviously, we have different, all of our bodies, like, isn't it amazing? We have all these millions of bodies, and unless you're an identical twin or triplet or something, we all look a lot, we have vast differences. They come from very different backgrounds. We all have histories that are completely various in this room. Think of all the states and places, the backgrounds that just constitutes this small group of folks that are here, right? Their experiences of the world vary greatly. You know, some of you have probably been through maybe a divorce, perhaps a bankruptcy, perhaps an illness of some severe sort. And we could keep running down the list of stuff that we've gone through. You got a contribution?
I say keep going.
It keeps going. Oh, the list. Yeah. The list is quite long. And it's always there for all of us, but we're learning how to, one of the things we're trying to do with this course is we're trying to get the list down shorter and to get the problems down to a less severe point, right? So health is not a major issue, or economics is not a major issue. I'm cleaning up my debt situation, someone might say, for example, right? So I can breathe easier without the fear of that hanging over me as deeply as it was. Nor at the beginning stages of their functioning as teachers of God have they as yet acquired the deeper characteristics that will establish them as what they are, the deeper characteristics. So we're going to go deeper with each of these characteristics here. So lesson 35, if you've been doing the course from the first part of the year, this would have been last week's lesson. My mind is part of God's. I am very holy. My holiness envelops everything. You see, what the first few lessons are tearing things down. Now we're beginning to build things back up again. The lesson that Yasuko just read a moment ago is an affirmation of who we really are, waking to that. It goes on to say, this idea does not describe the way you see yourself now, the lesson. It does, however, describe what vision will show you. We're going to talk about vision in a moment. It is difficult for anyone who thinks he's in this world to believe this of himself, to believe that his holiness envelops everything he sees. That would take quite a lot, wouldn't it, to be able to do that? Or to believe that you're very holy. But that's true. You are very holy, and your holiness does envelop everything it sees. Back to this. It's difficult for anyone who thinks he's in this world to believe this of himself, yet the reason he thinks he is in this world is because he does not believe it. Right? He does not believe that his holiness envelops everything that he sees. When an awakening occurs, say an awakening that occurs with a Jesus, then Jesus sees that everything as though it does envelop everything that he sees, right? A woman told me an experience that she had. She'd gone to a lecture of Ken Wapnick's in Atlanta, Georgia, and she was out talking to a friend in the vestibule prior to going into the lecture, and Ken came walking in and stopped and just talked to them for a moment and kind of greeted them, and then left, and she said, I just saw Jesus. if you knew Ken, that was not the only person that said that. It's not that he looked like the physical Jesus, but there was something about the presence. There was something about the eyes. There was something about being there that you couldn't help but feel that this man, if not completed, was well on his way to completing this process. Thank God. I mean, thank God that we can know it's possible to complete it. And there are people like Ken and Bill, whom I'm personally convinced Bill Thetford had completed this whole atonement process. But we got to work on it. That's what we're here to do. And that's why we're going to look at these 10 characteristics. So lesson 36 goes on to say, sinless means without sin. You cannot be without sin a little. You are sinless or not. If your mind a part of God's, you must be sinless by definition, or a part of his mind would be sinful. Your sight is related to his holiness, not to your ego, and therefore not to your body. The body is the ego's chosen home. We've said that many times. Okay? But you're not a body. And there's a part of us that really knows this. Let's talk about vision for a moment. Just went to this sort of a definition. Vision in Core's terms does not mean physical sight. Right? It's an insight rather than an external sight. It is the perception of Christ or the Holy Spirit that sees beyond the body to the spirit that is our true identity. The vision of forgiveness and sinlessness through which is seen the real world. This is not the real world. Vision is purely internal, reflecting a decision to accept reality rather than to make up reality. That's what we do in this world. We live in, I have a friend who calls live in what she calls the collusion of illusion. We have agreed upon we have a collusion of illusion. And the collusion of illusion, again, is what you see on television. Or it's in the ads. Or it's in whatever we make valuable and real. It's the idols, all the idols that we create. And we can create lots of idols. Things like titles and before and after names are idols. Cars can become idols. Anything external, jewelry could become an idol. A position could become an idol. Anything that you want to make into an idol, you can make. We even have, my wife likes to watch American Idol. Right? So we're going to take some poor, young, talented singer and turn him into an idol. And how does that? If you're 16 years old and a great singer with a guitar, how do you avoid falling into that trap? Right? And people who do fall into it, famous people have very difficult lives. Especially very famous people. Princess Diana didn't stand a chance in the world at being happy. I mean, how are you going to be happy with the paparazzis chasing you around? Marilyn Monroe, you can keep running through the list of people who they would have been so much happier if they had not been so famous, right? Because once you're out there in front of you can't even walk down the street, right? You can't even step outside your house, right? Who would want to be able to do that? It's much better to be incognito. And then they have to be incognito. And that doesn't always work either. So to finish this, vision is a shift in attitude from the ego's purpose for the body, which is always specialness. Always specialness. Specialness in one way, or in a lot of ways that we can make it special. Muscles, beauty, clothes, status, whatever it is that we attribute to it. To the Holy Spirit, vision is always forgiveness. And let's go to our next one. So true vision is the natural perception of spiritual sight, but it's still a correction rather than a fact. Spiritual sight is symbolic and therefore not a device for knowing. It is, however, a means of right perception, which brings us into proper domain of miracles. A vision of God would be a miracle rather than a revelation. The fact that perception is involved at all moves the experience from the realm of knowledge. That is why visions, however holy, do not last. That's an interesting characteristic about visions. Helen was very visionary. Actually, we probably all are. If you just, I'm talking about in the literal sense of the term now. Dreams, for example. We all have dreams, and they're visionary. The dreams that we have. Very often, they're ego-oriented stuff that's going on. But sometimes you can transcend the ego-oriented stuff and has another kind of quality about it, which is as though you're you're seeing something. But they don't last, right? They never last. It's always just for a moment because it's something in time. It's not something in time. Okay, get a mic, and don't stand in front of the...
What comes to mind is the happy dream.
Yes.
It doesn't last,
Oh,
but it's better than
right.
we're on our way. Fear not, you will be hurled into reality.
That's right. We'll talk more about that later. Okay, let's go on. So everyone possesses each of these 10 characteristics of a teacher of God. They are, however, unused and therefore undeveloped. Glinda, the good witch from The Wizard of Oz, tells Dorothy and her companions, the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, the Cowardly Lion, that they already possess what they seek. The Scarecrow is smart, the Tin Man has a heart, and the Lion is brave. Heaven was here all along. So the Wizard of Oz says, you've always had the power, my dear. It's just had to be, you just had to learn it for yourself. You know, that's kind of a summarization of the Course in Miracles in one line from the Wizard of Oz. Right? You've always had the power, my dear. You just had to learn it. So this is a school. The bodies are learning devices. We're here to learn. We're here to learn the truth of who we really are. And the truth of who you really are is that you really are the Son of God. Already. It's already true. It's already a fact. But we've got to learn it. So that's why we've got a book of 669 pages and a workbook and a manual for teachers. And we have to go through it. We have to learn it. And it's not clear in the beginning. Right, Patricia? But it gets clearer and clearer and clearer as you read it, as you move deeper and deeper into it. Let's go a little further. So we'll do a little bit of trust to start with. So what's interesting about trust, it's number one, all 10 of the characteristics of a teacher of God, there is actually literally an order to them. There's a reason why 1 is 1. And there's a reason why 10 is 10. And it will explain that as we go through them. You'll see why one is built upon another. In fact, it's when we get to the last characteristic. The last characteristic of a teacher of God is open-mindedness. And what it means by that, it means complete, whole, total open-mindedness. It even says, open-mindedness, perhaps the last characteristic a teacher of God develops. Right? That's the opening line for it. So if this is total open, we're not condemning anything. We're not analyzing or interpreting anything. You know, we're just completely open, right? Remember the definition of Jesus from the Course in Miracles? Jesus was a man who saw the face of Christ and all, underline the word all, of his brothers and sisters, and remembered God. It doesn't make any difference what's on the surface. We're looking past the surface. When I was with Ted back in November, and he just died, you could just see this kind of crying out for love in the eyes. Just, you know, he didn't want me to go. Because, you know, I love you. He just kept saying, I love you, John. And, you know, I love you, John. I love you, John. I kept saying, I love you too, Ted, I love you too, Ted. What are you going to do, right? That's what we want to reach back to. So, a little bit of this. Give me but a little trust in the name of complete trust I have in you, and we will easily accomplish the goal of perfection together. See, again, that's the problem because it's perfection. We're going all the way to perfection, right? The children of God are entitled to the perfect comfort that comes from perfect trust. If you wake up in the morning and you're laying there in bed and you got guilt going on, that's hardly a state of perfection. But that's where we're going. That's where we want to get with this, right? Oops. So I want to talk about this a little bit. This is just sort of a really interesting thing that I found, stumbled onto. And it's fun when you find these overlaps and correlations. So I used to teach classes on mysticism right down the street at the New School University from 69 to 79. And then after that in other colleges and universities, State University. And my textbook was titled Mysticism by Evelyn Underhill. This is a picture of Evelyn. And don't read that. Let me just try to explain that to you. So Evelyn, she was very fortunate in a way. She was married. Her husband was a wealthy barrister, and so was her father. She never had to work. Like Helen Schuckman, she never had any children, so she didn't even have that kind of work to take care of. And so she wound up devoting her entire life to studying mystics and reading about mystics, and she wrote 34 books in the course of her life. Most all of them, 20 plus of them, nearly 30 of them, were about mysticism. There are a few novels that got mixed in there as well. She was also a metaphysical poet. I think there's a lot of similarities between Helen. I would love to have known Evelyn. I think she probably was a bit like Helen in the sense of deep thinker, metaphysical poet, no children so that she could think a lot. Interestingly, Helen's husband had no interest in the Course in Miracles, never took a look at it. Isn't that he always just called it Helen's book. It's Helen's book, right? And her husband and father had no interest in her work that she was doing and the research that she was engaged in. She never received a doctoral degree, but when she died, it's interesting when she died, I'll talk about that a little bit later. She died in the spring of 1941, and so did one of her best friends, who was Rabin Tagore. Tagore, who was the first non-Westerner to win the Nobel Prize for Literature. And she and Tagore wrote a book together. It was actually, they compiled a book together. It was a book of Kabir's poems that they put together, Kabir being a great mystic of the East as well, right? I also like, hear anything about dates? I love dates. She's born in 1875. So was Carl Jung and Albert Schweitzer. Huh? No, she died in 41, 75. She was born in 75. And so was Jung, and so was Schweitzer. These are just fun things. Let's go on a little bit. So, but let's wait, the bottom quote. We've got to go back to the bottom quote from her. Instead of saying there is an ego and I want to kill it, seek its source and you find it does not exist at all. Now that's one of the basic teachings of non-dualistic philosophy. It's the teachings of Wee Woo Wee and Ramesh Belkazar and some of those, the Hindu teachers are as well. There is no ego. The Course in Miracles says the same. There is no ego. It has no reality, has no existence at all. But she discovered this by studying mysticism as I said. I have one more quote, then we're going to take our break here. We mostly spend our lives conjugating three verbs: to want, to have, and to do, forgetting that none of these verbs have any ultimate significance except so far as they are transcended by and included in the fundamental verb to be. Right? So, by the way, to be is Shanti's dog's name. It's 2:45. We take a break at 2:45. We'll come back and look at the other stages in development.